Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm going to do a little chart demonstration for you. It's been a while since I've done a chart demo, and I figured today would be a good day to do one. I do these chart demos for a few reasons. One, I know that a lot of you are studying out there on your own. It is always helpful to see theory put into practice. So hopefully this is something valuable for those of you who are self-taught students studying on the web. And also, I do it because usually, in light of an upcoming class that I'm teaching, I want to give people a look at what kinds of things you're going to learn and study in my courses. So I'll tell you more about my upcoming course at the end of this video, but today what I want to do is just give you a chart demo from my practice. This comes from a client who gave me permission. I always ask for permission from my clients if I'm going to demo anything. And I think you'll find it interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen so you can see it. Now, the basic lesson that I'm going to illustrate today is two things. One is natal context. Natal context is a way of saying that we want to understand what the birth chart is saying about the life as a whole. Because when we understand some of the most important themes and patterns, the areas in which the karma is most likely to blossom, you could say, then when we look and gather our data when it comes to transits and forecasting, we know which lessons are most likely to be activated depending on which planet is receiving a transit. So when I look at this chart, here's what I'll do with a client. And these techniques obviously are things you can try on. And these are things, of course, in my programs that we elaborate on quite a bit. Transits and forecasting is almost exclusively the task of my second year program. The first year program, we're learning all the basics of natal delineation. So in year one, you're kind of learning how to read the chart on its own. In year two, you're looking at how to track the unfolding of the karma in time from the moment of birth. And they really each deserve a year. So it's a long, slow study that you should take on to make sure that you're really proficient in doing this kind of thing. But again, hopefully these tips are useful for those of you who don't have the time or the energy or resources to study full time. So now, what I do when I take a look at the chart is I kind of gather, I get a sense of what are the main things happening in this chart right now. And I have my own little method of doing that I'm not going to break down, at full length because it would take a long time. In fact, I think it takes 6 classes to break it down in my year 2 class. But check this out. So doing a quick scan of the chart, you can see which planets are receiving squares, oppositions, or conjunctions from slower moving planets, say, Jupiter out to Pluto, because those planets tend to move quite a bit slower. And oftentimes you'll find that you're going to see several ways in which the chart is communicating basically the exact same thing through different symbols, different transits, and so forth. In this chart, the thing that I notice is, hey, look, we have Venus at 23 degrees of a cardinal sign. That puts that big stellium in Capricorn, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto in the past year of 2020 right into a square with Venus. Okay, wow. So that's the big transit. If you look throughout the chart, that's really the biggest one of the moment. The other main thing that's happening that kind of starts to corroborate with the Venus transit is you've just had the nodes of the moon change signs, which means you're going to start getting eclipses in Sagittarius, which is the 7th house. Now, that transition starts taking place in 2020. So what do I know about 2020 when I sit down with this client? What's my prep tell me? Venus and 7th house issues are a major focus right now. Now, that could mean a variety of different things. For example, marriage is an obvious low-hanging fruit, love, sexuality, marriage, but also with the 5th house involved, it's possible that children and pregnancy are a theme. Now, this person is born in 1971, so if I'm looking at this chart dry and I don't know the person, I'm guessing that we're talking about not getting pregnant, but probably their children and issues with their children if they have them. Otherwise, I'm looking also at, again, just the topics of love, relationships, marriage, sometimes women, friends, and sisters, which are all Venusian symbols, could be a part of it as well. So, okay, that's how I've gathered my evidence. And you'll see I actually titled this chart Client Venus. So I'm thinking something with relationships is going on. Now, when I look at this chart, what do I see surrounding Venus? Well, look, we've got the Sun, Venus, and Mercury all in the fifth house in Libra, Venus's sign. And the fifth house is traditionally called the joy of Venus. I also note that I have the moon, the other luminary, in the 12th house, exalted in Venus's sign of Taurus. Okay, so I'll just do a little quick analysis because although there are many possibilities here, what does all of this have in common? Well, let's get one more little piece of context and let's look at Saturn in the first house. We have Saturn in the first house people, among other things, because this is only one possibility, sometimes will struggle with joy, meaning they may be more of a melancholic. They could struggle with depression. Sometimes they're very serious people who are very dutiful, hardworking, incredible, like grandfatherly or grandmotherly energy. It can be a very good thing to have Saturn in your first house. So I'm not trying to rag on it, but one of the challenges can be, I don't know how to have fun. I don't know how to experience pleasure, or I tend to get repressed or pent up when it comes to pleasure. Do we see any potential for that to be an issue here? Yeah, we do, because we have the moon exalted in Venus's sign, but in the 12th house. What was the 12th house called? The joy of Saturn. And where is its dispositor? Well, unfortunately, Venus is in a place that the moon can't see. In the fifth house, they don't have aspectual connection with one another. So you could say that there's a little bit of a disconnect. And now what we're starting to get is a theme that seems to start appearing in the chart, which is, hey, maybe this lifetime in part is about this person trying to define what pleasure is. What is not just pleasure, but what is appropriate pleasure? Or how do I experience joy or happiness or harmony that's not just the picture book version of it, which Saturn in the first may try to create, because Saturn in the first tends to be sometimes a little bit more rigid or sometimes a little bit more dry. And so a person will say, I've got to do the right thing, be the right thing, look the right way. And there might be a really beautiful environment, but in a chart like this, one of the things I'm writing down at the top of my list is, are they really happy? Are they really experiencing joy or pleasure? Or is there some way in which they're having a hard time accessing that deeper, more spontaneous, sensual, embodied sense of joy and happiness? Now, this is a very, very common theme. I would say, again, if you've been watching my series that I've done on what I've learned in 10 years of doing charts, so many people walk in with all different kinds of lessons that we're all learning and different deficiencies and things that we have to compensate for and get better at and stuff like that. But in a chart like this, I'm going, what would this Venus transit be about? And one thing that comes to my mind is the topic of pleasure, and whether this person has access to healthy form of pleasure or not. So with that context in mind, as well as other things in my notes, I approached this reading saying, hey, we're going to talk about Venus today. So the first thing I said was, look, Venus is in the 8th house and Pluto and Saturn are in the 8th house. The eclipse is coming through the 7th and they're squaring natal Venus. What has been happening in your love life lately? Say since maybe since 2019, but let's just say in 2020, what's been happening with your love life? And that was the first question that I asked this client. And what happened was, as Pluto, Saturn were getting together in January, and I think it ended up being in February, just a little bit after their conjunction, as Pluto and Saturn were pushing over the exact square to Venus, this person had an ex boyfriend die in a freak accident. Like I won't go into the details to keep anonymity, but like weird, like something no one should ever die from. And it was just this really crazy freak accident. Now, this is an ex, right? So they have a current relationship. And I was like, that's interesting. It's someone in the past. Like that's a really powerful thing to happen, but to happen to someone that you're not with. Well, this person had maintained a friendship with this individual over the years, so they were still close. And it turns out that this person had unresolved feelings for their ex. And within the context of a current relationship, the death of their ex then started basically revealing this deeper issue around happiness and pleasure. Let's just put it very, very simply. This individual was, this X was someone that was risky, kind of dangerous, intense, very Pluto Venus type of relationship, actually, where there's a sense of there being something at stake. This is not a safe relationship per se, but it is a vital one. And we've all probably had relationships like that. Some are meant to last and some aren't. The relationship didn't last because this person felt like the relationship was the person, and that quality, that same dynamic quality, was perhaps too unstable. Understandable, no judgment. Then they got into a relationship that was someone who was very, very, very safe, but had no deeper edge or risk or vulnerability, or, that where there's that edginess where you feel vulnerable and alive, and it's a little bit more primal. That's a chemistry thing that's really, it's a tricky thing for all of us, right? To manage, to be in a relationship where you feel that chemistry, it makes you feel alive. But also, somehow it has to be harnessed if you want to maintain a relationship over a long period of time in a stable, healthy way, which not everyone does, but this person did. So the death of her ex, who she had these unresolved feelings for, essentially started pushing on the button of, am I just being safe? Am I in a relationship that's actually just all about safety? And this is exactly what she was struggling with when she came in for the session. And this was something that, again, having not spoken with her prior to the reading, knowing nothing about her, that the birth chart showed so vividly. So the majority of the session ended up being about, how do we find a degree of pleasure, health, happiness, stability, while there's still being a feeling of soulfulness? Because that's what the soul is actually seeking, right? Is a feeling of there being something, that reality is like a play. And if it doesn't feel like there's anything at stake in your life, in the imagination, in the heart, and in the soul, we get really bored. Yeah, it might look nice, it might feel comfortable, it might feel secure, but if we're not living with some sense of awe, mystery, if our heart doesn't pound a little bit, you know what I mean? The soul starts feeling lifeless. There needs not just to be the living, but there needs to be something that we're living for. And that's really, really important. And Pluto is one of those planets that can emphasize that. Interestingly enough, Saturn is emphasizing the same message in a different way, because Saturn square to Venus can be all about, first of all, in the eighth house, either planet can point to death. Saturn can point to that feeling of restrictiveness and the feeling of Venus being sort of restricted by safety and calculated conservative choices in love. Pluto, on the other hand, is emphasizing the raw libidinal need or drive that we have to encounter life in its bloody messiness. Either way, both of those planets squaring Venus, we're bringing this up. So in a chart reading, my overall piece of advice is always, always try to establish, okay, what transits are happening, and can I narrow it down to one theme or one topic or two, maybe sometimes even three, that seem like they are going to be really important right now, or say in the year ahead or something like that. Then what we want to do is try to figure out, well, what is the karma around this topic in the birth chart? It was pretty easy for me to be able to see that, yeah, there might be a pattern of repression, or there might be a pattern of, trying to be conservative and choose the safe path, but grappling with what defines pleasure and happiness and joy. All fifth house Venus topics in ancient astrology. Got the moon exalted but it's in the 12th, the place of Saturn in the first house. So these are the kinds of things that come up. We know that Saturn is going to be more challenging in this chart, by the way, because it's a nighttime chart, and Saturn in the nighttime charts in ancient astrology was considered to be more difficult. So there's a lot of different factors here that, came into play. But if you can always establish natal context alongside of your transit, you're going to have at least an idea. Sometimes you'll hit, sometimes you'll miss, but you'll have at least an idea of which themes or topics are going to be really important to your client in their life, as well as how the current transits relate to those big life themes in the birth chart. So I hope that this was interesting for you. I've got a few more of these I'm going to do. So thank you to my client for being willing to share this. I think the conversation was really fruitful in terms of saying, hey, look, at this time in your life, one of the pieces of advice is like, you gotta make sure you talk to your partner about this kind of thing. Don't burn and smolder internally without saying, hey, this is my need, or this is what's going on, which can also be a Saturnine thing, right? To say, no, I'm fine. Like, just let's just keep going the way things have been, and to not take the risk of opening up. Saturn is sometimes a little conservative like that. So at any rate, I hope that you enjoyed this little breakdown today. Now, I would love to hear which transits that you're all working with, or what kinds of things you're looking at in your own birth chart. If this causes you to have any insights or any light bulbs turn on upstairs and you want to share an insight or reflection, please feel free. In the meantime, remember that my class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, starts November 14th. It meets on Saturdays from noon till about 2:30, sometimes 3 p.m. Eastern time. We have 30 classes on the year. Every class is recorded and kept in an online virtual folder for you throughout the year, the audio video, along with the PowerPoints and class notes and optional quizzes and homework and reading and bonus material. And there's a classroom forum. We have 12 guest speakers that come in outside of those 30 lessons. You got 42 lessons on the year. Plus, we also have breakout study sessions where we review things that we've been going through. So if that is interesting to you, check out my website, nightlightastrology.com. It is the first year Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic course. We have need-based tuition available for those who need it, especially if you're struggling due to COVID-19. So you can check that out. Also have an early bird rate. If you pay up front, you save $500 off the cost. And there's also a payment plan if you need it. So hopefully some options there to make it possible for people who are at home still. A lot of us at home. It's good to, online learning is really been a huge thing for me. I've taken a lot more classes and watched a lot more virtual content since COVID stuff started up. But it'll be nice to see some of you in class, hopefully. And if you have any questions about anything, feel free to email me, info@nightlightastrology.com. That's what I've got. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.